Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and glad of it. I am looking forward to tonight's program, and I'm going to tell you why. I know that you're shocked, right, that I would be at all excited about any show I do. I love all of our guests. Tonight's guest, Gail Hayssen, is someone who I share a lot of common interests with, and what she does and the research side is what I and my research partner Frank Lee have started and are just in baby steps right now getting things off the ground. But she has had paranormal experiences since she was a teenager. She has worked with shamans, experienced miraculous healings, remote viewing, dreams that help solve mysteries, and she'll talk about it, what it was like to be a test subject. I don't know if I would like that term. I don't know if I would apply that term necessarily to her, but she is thebomb.com, so much fun, and she is a Woodstock attendee. I think that is probably the only reason that I would like to be a little older than I am, is so that I could have attended that. And she had a ball. There is so much that we're going to talk about, that she's going to share about that experience. She has there was an iconic photo taken of her while she was there, and some of the stories are fantastic. I am so looking forward to this. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss her abilities. We're going to discuss the research. We're going to discuss how she developed her relationships in Mongolia to the point of being granted an honorary doctorate from the Mongolian Science Academy. So, man, there's just so much. And Gail, I am so glad you are here with me. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm very happy to be here.
I am happy you're here too, because I love all of the experiences that we've talked about and that I've read about. You have not lived a sedate life. And
no.
I love that.
And I don't think I ever will.
No, that's part of it, right? You're there for the ride. That's what you're supposed to do. Sometimes we get out of sync with, or sometimes I get out of sync with that, and that's okay. But I always come back.
Oh, I think we all do.
Yeah,
that's just
too.
Part of the nature of it all.
Aggravating, though. Well and truly. So, what do you want to start with? This is all about you.
Well, if you'd like, I would start. I'd love to tell you the full Woodstock story and how many things it's done. It's just kind of a story that even though it's from 50-something years ago, it keeps going on and on.
Well, I love that. And something I didn't tell you is that we take little breaks at 20 minutes and 43 minutes after the hour. So if you hear me say, we're going to need to stop for a second, that will be why. We were chatting so much before the show started, y'all, that we just never got to real life. But yes, please do share your Woodstock stories, because I am listening.
Well, let's start off with, I was living in where I grew up in Flushing, New York, in Queens, and on the radio, because that was the form of information in those days for all young people, we heard about this upcoming concert. And it was going to have all in one place an incredible collection of all the bands we would all want to hear. So this was very attractive, but I didn't think there was any way I was going to be able to go because I had just turned 14 years old. I didn't drive a car, and I wasn't sure how I could actually get there. But fortunately...
Logistics can be a bear.
Yes. Fortunately, I hung out at a place called Bound Park in New York, and that was about 4 blocks from the house where I grew up. And our neighborhood guys that I hung out with there were all going to go, and they invited me to go with them. So I had the opportunity, as long as I could pay for my ticket and contribute to the food, I would be able to go with them. So I worked babysitting for this woman who, when I was 12, had given me a beautiful teardrop peace symbol, which I'm actually wearing in the film, the Woodstock film, and which I still have today, and which was actually also featured in the 50-year anniversary book, but I'll try not to deviate too much here. And it was her 75 cents an hour of babysitting that I collected to create a stash of 16 whole dollars, which today sounds like nothing, but then was really a lot of money and a lot of hours of babysitting. And we paid off our tickets. We couldn't go for the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because the guys that I was going with were 5 years older than me. So they were all working full-time jobs. So 2 of them were working at a department store in Flushing called Klein's. And so as soon as they finished work at 5, we jumped in my friend Ricky's brother's yellow Impala, and we were going to drive up to Woodstock right from there. 2 weeks earlier, we thought we'd better take a trial run and go up and check out the roads because we know what New York traffic is like, and anyone who's ever been in New York knows it can be a nightmare. An area that would take you maybe 1 hour to get to could take you 4 hours. So we knew that there was a possibility. We never thought 500,000 people were going to come and all the roadways would be blocked, but we had already planned for that. When we went up there, it was when they were just, because they had to move the concert. The concert had been moved from Wakil, I think it was called, to Bethel. And it was continued with the name Woodstock, but it's actually a bit of a distance from the actual town of Woodstock. And so when we went to see where the site was, it was the most beautiful pastoral scene of green rolling pastures, just beautiful rolling hills. And at the bottom of the rolling hills were all these guys. In fact, we got to meet one of them, Chip Monk, I think his name was, or Chuck Monk, Chip Monk.
I was going to say Chip Monk.
Something like that. Yeah, Chip, I forget what his, he is it, something like that. And he was one of the people working on putting on the concert. And we went down and talked to him, and they didn't even have the towers or anything there, and it was only a few weeks before. They were just hammering away with plywood and trying to get the stage done since it was such a last-minute production. So we spent some time visiting with them, and the guys that I was with were tripping on acid at the time, so they were kind of rolling around the hills, and I was playing my tambourine, and it was just kind of one of these sort of little scenes. So that was what we left when we left our trial run at Woodstock. When we returned that Friday night, getting up there was the nightmare that they were talking about, but Ricky had planned all these alternative routes ahead of time to get us through back roads to get us there. And in fact, at one point he went in reverse on an off ramp, went on an up ramp or something on one of the ramps there on the freeway. And that crossed us over, and somehow we got out of all that and we got to the concert site.
Oh, that is too fun.
Yeah, that was Friday night. So Saturday morning, the guys that I all went with had all been campers. They all had sleeping bags and all these things. I had never camped or done anything. So I had like a blanket, and I slept in the back seat of the car because I didn't have camping equipment. And they slept outside, not far from the car. And so we walked a long distance. I can't remember how long, but we walked a long distance, and we get to the spot where we had once seen the beautiful pastoral green rolling hills, and all we saw was massive amounts of people by the thousands and mud. There wasn't a blade of green grass left, and there was just packed. It's an amazing sight to come upon when you see that many people. But because it was the morning, some of the people hadn't returned yet, and that's the only reason we got to be. We were in the 12th row center.
Oh my gosh.
Stage. And the reason we were that close was because my guys carried a big log that we had found along the way so that all 5 of us could sit on this log. So we didn't actually have to sit immersed in the mud, which this was very thick mud.
Yes. I've seen the imagery.
Yes, it was the kind of mud that when you walked with your shoes, it would hold your shoe in there and your foot would come out.
Yes. And only your foot.
Right. It was challenging mud. And it had a certain stench to it also, I guess a farm kind of a stench. And that was just some of the things that that's a smell you remember, the texture of the mud. But the amount of people was nothing we could have ever imagined we would see. And because we sat on that log in the 12th row, in the beginning you could sort of put your legs out while you were sitting on your log. But by time the crowds had all returned, by mid-afternoon for the concerts, you had to sit like a sardine with your knees all squashed up and pressed and your arms all up so you look like a little ball, And
yes.
The parts where I'm in the film had to do with there was a little area, they had to make some way where you could navigate through this massive crowd. So there was a walk-through area in the front of the stage, and everyone, one group would be going to the left and another group would be going to the right, and that would be like a man-made sort of a walk area. And that's where you could go, because if you wanted to dance, which of course all this music made you want to dance, you didn't want to obstruct all the other people's views, so you could go up to that area close to the wooden fence, and that's where you could stand and dance. And that's where they shot the footage of the part where I was in the Woodstock film. So we're there, we're squashed like sardines, we're listening to incredible bands, and I'm with my 4 favorite guys. I had the time of my life. I mean, we didn't experience the things that other people had experienced because we were so prepared. And I had come with my first camera and my first roll of film. So I have photos that I took that were published in the 50-year anniversary of Woodstock Book by Dan Buxton, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I was thrilled at the first roll of film I ever took. And we didn't know history was being made. We never took pictures of each other. So I never had any photos of me at Woodstock until I saw myself in the film.
That's so cool that you got those, though. Isn't that amazing?
Well, and I'd never used a camera before except, like for a little Polaroid that you had in those days. No, I had a 35 millimeter camera. My dad worked in a gas station, and sometimes men would come through that had hot stolen items that they'd sell. And one of the hot items my dad bought was this little 35 millimeter beauty light camera, which he had given me. So I had this, stolen piece of camera. And my 35 millimeter, and I took pictures of John Sebastian, and I took pictures of Country Joe, and I took pictures of the whole, the field of people, and pictures of people sitting in the towers. Never did I think to take a picture of our friends or us. I don't know what we were thinking.
That is too fun, though.
So anyhow, we had just a really wonderful experience on the Saturday, but on the Sunday, after we'd heard all these amazing bands and we'd been that close, we decided on the Sunday maybe we should move to the back and be able to stretch our legs out, because you couldn't even put your legs out, and have the feeling of laying on a blanket and relaxing and listening to the rest of the concert. So we went up there for Joe Cocker, and when he did, with a little help from my friends, it was it was what we were doing there, because everything we had, we shared with everyone around us. We had so much pot and hash and food, and anyone next to us or around us, we just say, here, would you like some? Would you like some? And it was such the experience there in being with that many people in conditions that you would consider not very favorable. We were being poured on with rain. We were stuck and smashed like sardines. There was no gas. There was no food. There were no bathrooms. There were all the things that would make a vacation or time away considered miserable, but instead it was turned into a historical moment of people coming together as one. And in fact, while I was sitting there in our 12th row in our seats, we watched this man, and I don't know if he used markers or exactly what he used, because first of all, we have to remember these are memories from over 50 years ago now. I'm glad that I can remember some of them because the amount of pot and hash we smoked, They say if you went to Woodstock and you remembered it, you weren't there.
Or you didn't have enough activities.
We didn't smoke enough, I guess, right? So I felt like here we are in this scene, and here's this man painting across the wood, "We are one." And it wasn't if he painted it or if he used magic markers. I'm not sure what he used, but somewhere across, when we watched him do this, and it was such a beautiful message of what was really happening and what's the real possibilities that can occur with large groups of people when they're not fighting or angry. There was no drunk people being nasty. It was, there was a lot of psychedelics being used, and I think that kind of mind expansion drugs and things like this brought about a very, very peaceful event that could have turned very differently with that amount of people in such a difficult, challenging situation. The bands, they had all kinds of issues they had to deal with when they were coming on. All of a sudden, things kept changing. If the wind and the rain started and all of a sudden someone couldn't play, they had to be put on the next day. So they had their own different little things that happened each day that they had to deal with.
Like I said, logistics can be a booger.
Oh, yeah. And it was a time, it was one of the things I noticed when I'd been interviewed for the Woodstock Museum for different things that they're archiving there, is that there was in the ratio, there was, many, many more men or guys than there were girls there. So I don't know why, if that because it was a concert or exactly what, but there was definitely a larger ratio of men to women, and everybody was kind. The men the couple of things that I remember that stuck out was there was a guy who was running around. At first I think he had a loincloth or something on, but I think eventually he was pretty much naked. And he was carrying a sheep. And in the beginning, he could walk the sheep around in the crowd because it wasn't so packed. But then as it got to where you could not walk in between people, he was carrying his sheep, and he had a sign, something about, that you shouldn't kill animals for food, something like that. I heard on the Woodstock site that he was actually the heir to the S&H Green Stamp Company, and he was actually the man who was really the beginning person who started the protection of animals or something. I can't remember what the exact title was, but he went on to do great work in protecting and saving animals. So
that is so neat, but we have to stop.
Okay.
We have to take a break, and we will be right back. Y'all come right back too.
Okay.
This is just better and better.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk radio.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine, and I am Kat Hobson, your host, with my guest, Gail Hayssen, and we are trying to get her into chat, but I am so glad that y'all are listening and enjoying, and I'm getting messages left and right, but if you cannot get into chat, all you have to do is search Spreaker, and you will find Spreaker.com// But you'll find it under Fate Magazine Radio. Search Spreaker for Fate Magazine Radio. And Gail, I'm bringing you back in here.
Okay.
And so here we go. She was trying to get to the chat, and she's, I'm sure, going to be continuing to. I'll have to get it for her. But
So
you know what? I am just having the best time, Gail.
So
your experiences are so good. And, you know, I saw an image of that pendant.
Oh, yeah, it's in the book.
It is in the book.
Yes.
And that is lovely.
Well, I have to tell you, can I deviate a little bit on these stories?
Absolutely.
That peace symbol meant so much to me. I wanted to, I was kind of pretty much ending what it was like going to the Woodstock concert. And I wanted to go on to a story about how I got that actual peace symbol. I was babysitting for this woman, Sharon Breton, and she gave it to me as my 12-year-old birthday gift. And I saved it for you know, I'm now 66, so I've had it for a very long time and cherish it. And I was so thrilled to see it in the movie. But what's the most important part was that because of this 50-year anniversary, I was actually able to see her, which what ended up being the last time in our life together.
Oh.
So there's very, in fact, I'll just start off with how this all began with the Woodstock Book. So here it's been 50 years later. It's coming up to 2019. And my friends that I went to Woodstock with, one of them, we were close until he passed away in his 30s. And he was one of the first loves of my life, Ricky, a really, really beautiful man. And the other three men I was never able to contact, and I never found out what happened to them or where their lives went or what went on. And somewhere, all of a sudden, on my computer, I get this message, because I'm not a computer savvy person. As I said, I leave that to my husband, the MIT Yale man, and I just ask him to help me with everything. I say, I'll cook the food, you help me to get on Skype, you know? Anyway, so he says to me, I see this thing called messages, which I didn't know was on my phone. And in there were all these messages that people had sent me, and I never had accessed it. I didn't know it existed. And there was this message saying, we were contacted by someone and heard you'd been at the Woodstock Festival and we're doing interviews. Could you please contact us? Well, that message was 2 months old. So I called up the person and I left a message saying, I'm so sorry. I would have never been rude to ignore you, but I didn't know that I had messages in this place. I said, so if you're still looking for interviews, I would be thrilled. So I get a call back, and it's Dan Buxton, and he's telling me, I'm doing this book, and we're just finished with the interviews. He said, we have 1 week left, and I need to submit them all. He said, so you just got in under the wire. So I was like, I don't know if I'll make it in the book, but at least I answered his call. Well, we ended up getting on the phone, talking for, I don't know, an hour and a half or so about all my stories. And he tells me, this is wonderful. I definitely want to use this for the book. I'll be contacting you back. Well, he calls me back the next day to say that none of the interview had gotten recorded correctly.
Oh, my goodness.
The production manager called me, named Karen Matsu-Greenberg. And when Karen Matsu-Greenberg called me, she said, we have to redo the interview. I'm so sorry. And I said, it's not going to be like the first one because it's all sort of spontaneous, but I'll try to redo it again. And her and I end up in some lengthy conversation, and we end up talking about all these things, and we make this wonderful connection. And she sends me back to Dan Buxton, and we redo the interview again. And he says it's great. And he tells me later that I was the muse that helped him to finish the book, because he was only in his 40s and he didn't go to Woodstock. So I'm trying to explain to him and share with him what this feeling and experience of We Are One was like. So we ended up having a very nice connection also. And this goes on, and they're getting ready and they're going to do this book thing. And I submit my photos and I give them my interview, and I don't know if anything of this is going to happen. And it's May, and it's my birthday, and I go outside, and my husband tells me, you've got to come out here and look at something. And I think he's going to show me like a garden snake or I don't know.
Dear.
Whatever, right? And he takes me outside, and I'm outside looking, and I've just assembled one of those big, giant plastic chests that you put outside to put your lawn cushions in or your towels for your pool. And I have it all assembled, and I see that it's rocking back and forth, and I had just built this. I hadn't even put anything in it yet, and it's moving around, and all of a sudden the lid pops open, and out jumps this woman with a bouquet of balloons, and it's this Karen Matsu Greenberg who's producing Woodstock Book, who I've never met in my life, decides to make a surprise birthday visit, comes all the way from New York to California.
Oh, my word. How awesome. That's wonderful.
It was such a wonderful thing. And now, of course, it's 2021, and she's offered to help produce the book that I'm working on right now that I wrote some time ago called A Small Medium at Large,
yes.
Adventures of a Psychic Traveler. And we become friends, and she says to me, why don't you come out when we do the book release party at Woodstock?
Oh, my
which
goodness.
is really Bethel and at the Museum of Woodstock. She said, we're doing a special event, and I was so touched. I mean, I didn't write this book. All I did was contribute some photos and words, but they really wanted me there. So we were on this panel with Dan Buxton, the author, and Amelie Rothschild, who had done all the photos of the Fillmore East in all those years. She was a wonderful woman. What a thrill. And another gentleman that was also at the concert, and our friend. And we have this whole book panel. They have me up there. They're taking pictures of me. I meet the mayor of Woodstock and all the people involved in running the museum. And we just have an absolutely wonderful time. And I had not been there in the 50 years since the concert. So there I am running around with her on the fields again, and it starts to rain. And I feel like I'm really reliving this whole, 50 years ago experience is really coming back. But I'm making connections with all these people, and I'm talking on the stage and, telling them about the virtues of CBD, and all the things that have changed and come about, in those 50 years. So it was really an honoring and just really amazing thing. And it led to her then deciding after some, about a year later, 2 years ago, or whatever it was, she said, I think I'd like to help you see what I can do to see if we can get your book published. I don't know what we can do, but I'm going to check into it. So we've had this next other relationship. So I've gone and stayed at her house. She's come and stayed at my house. Dan Buxton and I write back and forth to each other. I met his wife, his child. I send them little jars of jelly. We're friends. So this whole kind of idea has sort of still transferred through all this. So then I ended up being interviewed for different things. So this gentleman, Paul Dittmer, was collecting, they have like an archives of stories where they want all the stories of the people who are still alive to tell their experiences at Woodstock. So they have a written archive, and then they also just recently we did one that was an oral history.
Oh, that's a great idea.
It was a great idea. So Paul says to me, have you ever tried to contact the guys that you went with? And I said, well, no, I didn't. Maybe I should give it a try. And I typed their names in. One of them, I couldn't remember how he spelled his name, so I couldn't find him at all. But the other two, I typed their names in Facebook, and I couldn't find any, I'm not that good with that anyway, but I couldn't find any contacts to them. So a couple weeks passed by after I've made this attempt, the first and only one in 50 years. And the next thing I know, I'm on this group, and any of you who are in Flushing, it's called Friends of Flushing. It's a chat group. And I'm in there, and I get this text that says, is this Gail Schneider? Because before I was married, I was Gail Schneider. And I said, yes. Is this Bobby Moore? And he said, I've been looking for you for 40 years.
Oh, my gosh.
And he was one of the...
How awesome is this?
It was beyond awesome. He was one of the 4 guys that we went to Woodstock with. And because of him connecting with me, I submitted his name to all the people at the museum. So now all his stories and his history is there. And also because of him, I found out why I didn't see Janis Joplin and he did, because I fell asleep.
Now that is still a risk at music festivals.
Well, I actually, we went back to our, little site and went to sleep. And he said, no, I'm staying up till the wee hours of the morning. And he stayed up and had an incredible time with Janis. So when we got reconnected like this, the missing pieces that your memory doesn't remember, he was able to fill in, and I was able to fill in his missing pieces, things I remembered that he didn't, things he remembered that I didn't. And since then, we've sent each other gifts in the mail. It's COVID. We had a whole plan of getting together, and then COVID hit. So I couldn't fly to New York. He couldn't fly to California. So we still haven't got to have a physical hug together. But when Bobby and I get that hug, I can just tell you it's going to be one of the most magical moments after all these years. He's just a really wonderful guy. And in fact, he reminded me of how I used to do these things as a teenager. I used to read tarot cards. And I was reading him tarot cards. He said, Gail, did you remember that you visited here once from California and you were about 15 and a half? And he said, and you read my tarot cards and you told me I was going to be a farmer. I said, I did? He said, yeah. He said, I live on acres of land here. I farm bees and chickens. And
oh, my gosh.
What a great story after all those years,
That is a great story. What a great connection.
It was a great connection. And then the other beautiful thing that happened with this was that I have two more stories on this. And one is about finding myself in the movie, and the other one is about going to the 50-year anniversary. I don't go to New York every year to see my family because everybody always comes here a lot. So I go every couple of years. And my friend Sharon, who had given me that beautiful peace necklace, was up in her 80s, at 80 or 81 now. And I had seen her a few years before, but I hadn't seen her for a couple of years. And so on the trip to go and be at the book signing in Bethel, I went and stayed with her. And she happens to live in the actual town of Woodstock, where their book place was having big things about Woodstock, and there were all kinds of things because the anniversary coming up, even though it's in the town where there was no concert. And I went to visit her, and she was very frail, and I got to open up and hold the book and show her the peace symbol that she had given me and how it was in the book. And I got to, sorry if I get emotional, but that's how I am. I got to tell her, how much I loved that she'd given me this necklace and how much I loved her. And if it had not been that time, I would have missed saying goodbye or being with her, because then the COVID hit and she passed away about 8 months or something. I can't remember exactly how long from that time, from that visit. And if I didn't get invited to Woodstock, I wouldn't have been in New York at that moment. I wouldn't have seen her. And I wouldn't have been able to give her those hugs and share that time with her and give her my thanks and love. So I feel like the Woodstock thing has done more than just, it's reconnected me to friends, and it gave me a moment to say goodbye to someone that meant so much to me through my whole life. In fact, now that she's passed, I'm there for her daughter and her granddaughter. If they ever need anything, they know they can call me on any psychic or spiritual questions or any dreams or anything that they're having. So I'm trying to step up and, be somewhat of a Sharon for them, even though I can't be her. So I'm so grateful for that book, because our connection and my time and love for her was more than meant the world to me. And then I got to tell you how I ended up with...
I have to tell you something.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, that the fact that this book came together is just such provenance. I mean, it's astounding. The experiences that you had to get there were astounding. I mean, I am a music festival lover. And the fact that you got to go to that and to see all those different artists. I actually used to work as a lifeguard at the beach down here. And it was so much fun because I got to hear so many people that I would otherwise not have been exposed to. And the music festival community travels for these in large part. A lot of people go to all of them. And I'm going to be so glad to see them open back up and start getting their acts back out. But
Yeah.
this was a blessing to you. This was so awesome for your whole life. And I just wanted to mention that I find that very beautiful.
For many years, well, I was interviewed when the 25-year anniversary, I was interviewed in our local Press Democrat newspaper. And then in the 50-year anniversary, they did a whole page spread on my Woodstock and my photos for the 50-year anniversary. So I was thrilled to have these little newspaper things. But I always felt I would be in a movie or a book because I was so close to the stage. So every time first when we watched the Woodstock film, it was on VHS. Then it became DVDs. So I had the director's cut DVD, and it was August 15 or 16, I don't know, but it was the 40-year anniversary day. And my friend Dean Radin plays amazing banjo. And my husband David plays incredible piano and keyboards. And some of the other people at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Marilyn Schlitz, her husband, they were all coming here for like a little music jam of just them playing music, not with an audience of people, but just for them to jam together. And I was making apple pies because it's August and I live in an apple orchard and I bake up all this pies all summer. And I'm making apple pie and I get a call from Dean on the phone. I'm sorry, we have to cancel at the last minute. I seem to be coming down with a little flu or a cold. We have to cancel. So we cancel the music, and I decide, well, I'm just going to keep the Woodstock movie on the DVD while I'm making the pies because I'll listen to the music and just sort of celebrate the anniversary like that, and even though we're not getting together. Well, I got my apron on, I got my apples I'm cutting, and all of a sudden I walk in for no reason at all to my living room. And now you have the big giant screens, right?
Right.
And I walked in exactly in the film. It's the 100th minute of the director's cut. And there I was.
Oh,
and I was
fun.
So shocked because 40 years I'm looking for myself.
And there you were in your living room.
Well, not only was I in my living room, but I figured out why we never found me. Because I'm in the original film.
Yep.
He never found me because in those days, Martin Scorsese, who was, I think, the director or whatever, I'm not sure what his part was, but they did this split screen, which now, of course, you do it on Zoom and everywhere, and you see two screens at once, right? And on the screen on the right, it was two lovely hippie couples running into the field to get naked and have sex. So we're watching the clothes and the nakedness starting to happen. So who would look to the left where there's this beautiful blonde flower child holding a daisy,
Right.
So I never looked at it, but because of this, just happened to walk in at the exact moment, I just started to cry. I'd been looking for a little short, fat old lady. I wasn't looking for a beautiful flower child,
Well, you were a beautiful flower child. That photo is iconic.
So I said to my husband, you have to come in here. He said, what's the matter? And I'm crying, looking at this. Said, I found it, So that was such a moment that I had to share that, of course, with everyone that I knew that I'd found myself, right?
Yep.
So here
I have
am
to interrupt you.
Okay.
I have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. But we are going to take a shorter break, and we'll be right back. Y'all come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am so sorry Gail got me tickled and I forgot where I was. But we are having the best show. And I hope that you are enjoying it nearly as much as the two of us are, because it's good times. And Gail, I interrupted you. I apologize.
Well, that's
but
okay.
please continue, because you had just found yourself, shared yourself with your husband. That sounds so funny.
Yes. And so I went around and was telling all my friends and anyone who came through the door, I found myself in the movie. Well, it turned out that my neighbor, Ed, who's a Vietnam veteran, said, I've watched that movie. I know exactly that photo of you. I liked that flower child immediately when I saw it. He said, I never forgot that shot. That's you? And then I told my electrician, and he said, I fell in love with you in that picture. And I'm thinking to myself, here are these people that are doing work for me or living on my property who'd fallen in love with this flower child in this film, and neither them or I ever knew it was me until then. So that was a really great, it was just so nice to have them say these things and to know where that picture was. So my husband and I go off to Italy, and he's doing some computer work and design with for a company there, and we're their guests, and he's going off to his big office meeting. And before I went, I had announced it on Facebook or whatever. I posted the picture of me in the movie on this, on the sites everywhere. And apparently in Italy, going to Woodstock is a very big deal. For some reason, they celebrate that event, even though it happened in the United States. It was very important to them in Italy. And so David's boss that he was working for in Italy had told the people that he knew about it. And when I went down in the morning that day, when David went off to the meetings, I go down in the morning to my bed and breakfast, and I'm sitting in there. I don't speak any Italian. And all of a sudden, Jimi Hendrix from the Woodstock film comes blaring out of the speakers. And the owner of the restaurant comes up to me and says, I heard you were at Woodstock.
Oh, my gosh. He played it for you.
He played it for me, at breakfast time,
Hey, anytime's a good time for Hendrix. What can I say?
Right. And then my husband goes into the meeting, and it's a publishing company, the biggest Italian publishing company. I don't remember the name. And he goes to sit down at the meeting, and then they're sitting there, and the first thing they say is, well, we know about the meeting, but we'd really like to talk to you about your wife that she went to Woodstock. So here in Italy, in this movie, So they shared about the movie, and it was all very, so it was like, it kept giving me these, Woodstock has been giving me, validations and feedbacks or something over all these years now. So that was a really good experience to reconnect that way and to get involved. So let's see, what was my final story?
When you went, any of these times that this has happened, did you not have like a precognitive moment that you felt like this was going to be so much more fun because, Woodstock was going to be showing back up in your conversations and
I was just blown away at what happened. None of us, I mean, I don't know what other people say, but none of the people I went with, we didn't know we were making history at that time.
Well, yeah.
We did know that it was like no concert festival we'd ever been to when, this was the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And when Country Joe sang his famous song, the Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag,
Mm-hmm.
where he says, I'll give you an F, give you a U, give you a C, give you a K. This is 400,000 people singing that song together. The force and power of that and the objections to the Vietnam War, it was a very powerful, energetic moment in history to be bonded like that in that song.
Can you imagine the power of that energy unified? That was momentous.
It really was a momentous thing. And we are one. I've never had that kind of experience at any other concert like that experience was. And I never had a concert that continued on through the rest of my life, coming in and out into all different areas of places of connections. So I'm really grateful. I can tell you that none of my girlfriends were allowed to go to that concert at 14 years old, but I had an unconventional life, so I could do what I wanted. So
it worked out the way it was supposed to, though.
Exactly.
Things have a habit of doing that.
They do, and I'm very grateful for that. So what else would you like to talk about? Unless you have any more questions.
Well, everybody has just been listening, I think, because we've got people that are still coming in, and my question is, when you found out that, I know that you were surprised that with the timing on the book, getting everything, all the ducks in a row and stuff. But when you found out that this was going to happen, when you brought your friends along for the ride, even inadvertently, because the kismet of all of this just was flowing with making this come together. So what did you feel? How did you feel when you were able to, every time again, like this person wasn't available anymore because they had passed, but this person just so happened to have been looking for you for 40 years, and boom, there they are, and their experiences are there. This was truly such a kismet experience. I feel like it had to be. Would you agree? I mean,
well, I feel that way throughout the whole experience. The kismet of walking in and finding it wasn't the 39-year anniversary, the 42 was the 40-year anniversary. The things that each kept happening for me, but that feels like how I live my life. Some people would call it synchronicities or coincidences, but for me, it's really more a lifestyle. It's kind of the way I like the way I live.
Well, because you're open to allowing those experiences to occur, I think, has a lot to do with why they do.
Exactly. And it's a good thing for other people to remind themselves that, to be more open, to be receptive to the things they may be feeling or hearing, or ideas that are coming to them that may be different than what they normally might be thinking about. It's important to, I don't have any filters. That's Dean Radin described. I asked him to explain to me, why was I psychic?
Well, that took a while.
And he said the one way he described it, and it made complete sense to me, is that I don't have I wasn't raised, my father raised us as atheists, so I wasn't raised in a heavily Jewish upbringing. I wasn't, there was not a religious life that we had. He didn't force education on me. I left school when I was 15 and came out to live with him in a pickup truck here and be hippies in Northern California. He opened our lives and minds to be able to think more critically and not to just sort of accept and go along the regular path. So I feel grateful for the lifestyle and unconventional childhood that I had, because it opened up all sorts of paths for me that I'm very happy to go down. And one of them would be discovering things like remote viewing.
Well, we're going to have to talk remote viewing because, I shared my experience with that from the viewee side.
Mm-hmm.
But I am just curious on your take on some of these things, because I didn't even know what some of the things that were happening around me were. I had no idea that everybody else didn't do it.
When did you start? When were you starting to discover these things? How many years ago?
When I found out that, because 30 years ago was when I found out that what I did wasn't just deja vu.
Mm-hmm.
And because I thought everyone did that, right? And I had a neuropsychologist working with a neuropsychiatrist who used me in a study, and they were, doing the question answer period. They were like, well, do you have deja vu? I said, sure. And I think they were surprised by my nonchalance about that, right? But I didn't know. And they said, well, how often do you have it? And I didn't want to be weird because I was already weird enough. And, well, seriously, right? So I said, well, just like everyone else. And they said, like, once a day, once every couple of months, every few years. I said, well, a few times a day. And they were like, what? I was like, no, yeah. It helps. It saved my life in the past. I love it. Why? How often do you have it? And they said, well, we haven't spoken to anyone else who did that. And I was just like, well, But it's my friend. I mean, it saves me. I like it. I want to keep it. Don't make it go away. And they said, we have no methodology to make it go away. But how has it saved your life? And I gave them a couple of examples, and they were just like tripping. Mm-hmm. So, but it is. It's a very beneficial part of my life, and I didn't know what clear cognizance was, and I didn't know what clairaudience was, or any of those things. So there you go.
Well, I a lot of times this happens when, children are young or when they're teenagers, but then they might go to a parent or someone and they try to shut it down instead of telling you that that's okay. And so it's good that you were able to continue on with the things that were happening to you and become comfortable with them. And it would be wonderful if other people could start to realize that this is the part of where we are all connected also. We're all connected in an invisible form, or an invisible way. And I started learning these things when I was a young girl, and my grandma Schneider used to tell me when she'd wake up in the morning that she'd have visits from dead people. And she'd say, oh, yeah, I saw my son Label, and I saw, they spoke to this one, and I spoke to that one. And I was like, oh, okay. She speaks to dead people. I didn't even think it seemed normal to me. I didn't think of it as weird or crazy or whatever. And I would have different things like that as a kid where I would see death. I had a lot of things about death, knowing deaths before they come. And I didn't have any, and I used to also have that astral travel where I would leave my body when I was laying in bed in my house, and I would sort of fly around the house. And I called it flying because I was, 9 years old, 10 years old. I didn't know what else to call this. And who do you talk to about things, right? Yeah. And it turns out your friends aren't flying like you are, but you don't know that,
Well, exactly. Like, I thought everyone could do all of the things I could do. And my mother, who is currently in a memory care unit, but right before she was shifted to there, told me when we were having lunch one day, she asked about my shows and things like that. And she was like, oh, yeah. She said they used to line up by my bed. And, everybody would want to talk to me. And I told them that, finally, when I was tired, I needed to go to sleep. I told them if they wanted anything else, I'd have to go talk to my mother. And I was like, you did what? I mean, I had no idea that she was a medium. And so we have to go and take our news break. And
Okay.
I am just having the best time with you. But anyway, I thought that was interesting because I didn't know. And I want to ask you some things about that if you don't mind.
No, not at all. Okay, so we have 5 minutes or 3 minutes?
We will be back right about 5 minutes. And for everyone, this is our news break. And you know what? I strive to always find a little good news in every one of these, even on days like today. So we are going to do that, and we'll be right back. Y'all come back too, because this conversation is nowhere near done, and it's just going to keep getting better and better.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama. Workplace fashions have changed over the years, but what matters stays the same: your employees. We've been the healthcare partner Alabamians have counted on for decades. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama. We cover what matters.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. Another 1,000 additional U.S. troops are being sent to Afghanistan for a total of 6,000 to help evacuate U.S. and allied personnel. The U.S. moved Americans at the embassy in Kabul, which has fallen to the Taliban, to the airport. The U.S. is one of many countries evacuating their embassy staff out of the country. But as Terry Schultz reports, NATO says its personnel are remaining in Kabul for now.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he's holding conversations about Afghanistan with allied governments and that NATO is helping keep Kabul airport operating so evacuations can take place. A NATO official says while the alliance is not removing its own personnel at this time, that position may change. The official was not able to say how many NATO diplomats are still in Afghanistan. NATO led the international military campaign from 2003 until combat operations ended in 2014, and it's continued training Afghan forces. NATO agreed it would fully withdraw troops along with the U.S. by August 31st. Even with the Taliban in control of Kabul, NATO continues to call for a political solution to the conflict, saying it's now more urgent than ever. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz.
Afghans in the diaspora say they're devastated at the events unfolding in their country. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports that she spoke with an Afghan woman who's also a French citizen and runs a network of girls' schools across Afghanistan.
47-year-old Shelaba Hashemi came to France in 1984 when she was 11. She returned to Afghanistan in 2001 to become the first woman to serve in a free Afghan government. She says there were several years of hope, but the last weeks have been harrowing as her teachers were being kidnapped and killed. Hashemi says there will be worldwide repercussions to the U.S. and Europe abandoning Afghanistan. 20 years after coming to defeat the terrorists, the West is leaving, but this time we're giving them the keys, she says. Hashemi says they will build a new country that will become a laboratory for international terrorism. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
In Haiti, the death toll from yesterday's powerful earthquake has risen to at least 1,297, with 5,700 injured. Margaret Lubin is Haiti's representative for the aid organization CORE.
It's devastation throughout the region, destructions. Hospitals are flattened. You have churches that are flattened. A lot of people are homeless, and hospitals are totally overwhelmed.
Speaking there to NPR's Weekend Edition, crews in the impoverished nation are searching for survivors amid the rubble. Thousands of people have been displaced from their homes or damaged or destroyed homes. This as Tropical Depression Grace heads toward the island nation with heavy rains and gusty winds, bringing the threat of flooding and mudslides. You're listening to NPR News. Canadians will head to the polls next month now that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called a snap election for September 20th. As Dan Karpinchuk reports, Trudeau kicked off the campaign this morning in Ottawa.
After having the Governor-General dissolve Parliament, beginning the process for a national election, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke to the media. He talked about his government's record in handling the pandemic, the challenges the country still faces, on continuing to deal with a fourth wave, on rebuilding a post-pandemic economy, and on a climate crisis facing the world. Trudeau says Canadians need to be heard.
This time we had a national conversation, a national direction on those next steps. And that's exactly what we're going to be able to do over the next 6 weeks.
Opposition parties have argued against an election, now accusing Trudeau of pursuing the vote for political self-interest. For NPR News, I'm Dan Karpenchuk in Toronto.
At the weekend box office, Free Guy, an action comedy starring Ryan Reynolds as a background character in a video game, opened with a better-than-expected $28 million in estimated ticket sales, despite declining audiences and underwhelming debuts amid the Delta variant surge. The movie, released only in theaters, no streaming yet, was directed by Sean Levy and made by the Walt Disney Company-owned 20th Century Fox, with a theatrical release contractually stipulated. Free Guy was expected to debut at around $20 million. U.S. futures contracts are trading lower at this hour. Dow futures contract down about 0.1%. NASDAQ futures are down about a fraction. Crude oil prices are down more than 0.5%. This is NPR.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to the second hour of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I tell you what, we are having just almost too much fun, if there ever were such a thing, but there's not, so we're safe. I just want to let you know, if you have not been to fatemag.com, the webpage for Fate Magazine, then you are missing out. We have a new episode just about to come out. We have archived... They're not episodes, they're editions. I'm thinking radio. But our most recent edition is just fantastic. If you have let your subscription lapse, the horror, or just need to get one, then you can get it there. If you want to add to and complete your collection, yeah, because we did go back to 1948. Did you know that? How cool is that, right? So then... that's the place to go, because we have uncirculated editions that are available, and Phyllis can help you find them. She is a genius. So we have t-shirts, we have trading cards, we have all kinds of nifty things. And Gail, thank you so much for being back with us for the second hour. I am having the best time visiting with you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
We have a couple of different questions in chat. Do you feel like hitting those, or?
I think I would rather continue on our, I'm not sure where we left off. I think it was starting off on remote viewing, or what were we talking about that we left off with?
Well, we were talking about that, my mother had let me know that she was a medium after, I'm about to be 60. Right?
Oh, that's when she told you?
That's when she told me, just this past year. And of course, my grandmother has crossed because, age does that. And it's a really interesting concept to me, because I always kid around and say, well, my grandma was New Age before there was New Age, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, do you find, because I know that you are not just a study participant, but also a researcher, do you find that these things tend to follow familial links, or is it just random when it shows up with the same people?
Well, first off, I never think of myself as a researcher, but I've been involved because I worked in the research department at IONS. I never thought of myself as a researcher because I just think of myself with someone with a lot of different experiences, and that when I ended up getting involved with Dean Radin and Russell Targ, I learned more about the abilities that I seemed to be gifted with that I didn't even know were there until I went through different experiments with them. But I have actually conducted experiments, and I have actually done research work like this, but I just never consider myself a researcher. Mm-hmm. Like someone like you who's real, you've got a whole plan going there. This was just, a period in my life when I worked in the research department at IONS, and we did, I think, it was 4 different experiments where I was part of the research team. And one of them was specifically an experiment we did where we were testing whether chocolate could be infused with energy, and then when the persons ate the chocolate, would that change their mood? And it's been cited many times. There was another experiment we did with Masaru Emoto on water and crystals. Do you know about that?
I do. And it's
so that was a very interesting. And again, all these things for me are synchronicity. It's nothing ever planned.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in Hawaii. I'm visiting my friend Andrew Annenberg, who's an amazing artist, really amazing. He paints with one hair on a brush. And his paintings are museum quality, very fine pieces. If anyone wants to, they just go on, look, I think it's, just type the name Andrew Annenberg and you'll find the amazing arts that he does. And he was studying because he wanted to put crystals in his painting. So he shows me this book and he says, there's a man in Japan, this Masaru Emoto, and he has photographs of crystals, and that's what I'm using to be able to paint the crystals in my painting. So I look at the book and I say to him, my friend Dean Radin, he should see this book. I think this would interest him. So I went back I didn't have a copy of the book, and at that time I think you had to get it through Japan or something back then.
Right.
And I come back home, and I happen to have Dean and his wife Susie over for dinner, and I mentioned this thing about going to Japan, and I think I had a copy of the book by then. I show him the book and the crystals, and he says to me, well, I'm a scientist, and I need scientific data to tell you whether this is really happening. I can't tell you what's going on in this until I do a scientific, research on it. And that was it. We just left it at that. We had the dinner. I just mentioned it. I think it was 2 years later, maybe 3. I'm assisting in the research department at IONS, and I'm in the reception desk there, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, this whole team comes in of Masaru Emoto and all his, the group he comes in with. It was quite a following of people, right?
Right.
They're there to meet with Dean and talk about an experiment. And when they leave, I say to Dean, I don't know if you remember, but 3 years ago, I showed you his book.
Oh, he hadn't reached out to him because of the book? He had just reached out to him?
No, Masaru Emoto came to IONS on his own.
Oh, that's fascinating and funny.
And funny that I happened to be in the office at that time. It's not like I worked 5 days a week or anything. I volunteered for a while, and then I was paid for a while. So none of it was always just a few days during the week that I'd be there. So I ended up participating in this particular experiment where we took water, and for some reason it was decided that Fuji water was the water that we had to use. And it was set up in, I think there was a camera or a video or something placed on the water, and it was to be prayed to. And don't quote me on any of these things because I'm never good on repeating exact data. But I think it was 1,000 people or something in Japan were praying to this water, but it was done at a distance. And I had the waters, 3 different waters, I think. I think one was the control water and one was the water that was prayed to. I don't remember exactly, but I had to package them all up and ship this water to Japan. And then Masaru Emoto did this testing where the waters that were prayed to created different crystals than the water that was, water, of course, that we know that came from other places. But the water that was not prayed to did not create the crystals that the water that was prayed to did. The details you'd have to read in the experiment because, as I said, I'm not good with recalling the perfect details. But it showed a difference in what happened when water was prayed to. And it was the first time that Masaru Emoto had ever done, more of a clinical type research experiment to prove the theories of what he was talking about. And I think they went on to do another one. I wasn't involved in the second one, but I think they went on to do a second one also with that one. These papers are, I think, the water crystal one, I believe, is published in the Explore journal. So anyone can go up and read on any of these particular articles. But it was a very phenomenal, and also the fact that, it all started because I happened to be in Hawaii. That I mean, it's just a weird thing that I would all of a sudden be at the, just the connection or the synchronicities seemed very unusual with this. And
yes, they are. But it's I agree that you're open to synchronicities. If you fight to keep your head down and out of it, then I don't think that they come to you.
Yes.
So, it's interesting because Robert in chat says, we're the same as life in a drop of water. We're ignorant of what lies beyond. And April says, well, words have actual creative or destructive power. We're made in the image of God who spoke creation into existence. And, I am a creationist. I think it's interesting. I don't think that it happened in 7 days. Depends on what a day was then, right? When you're dealing with the being that has no boundaries, how do you know it's a day? So that's just an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see here one of them, one of your comments here is someone who loves, I don't know where he saw it, but he loves my Shiva and sand dollar story.
The sand dollar. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that was also an Ion story. I don't know if you want me to tell that or if that's been said here. I'm not sure how he knows of that story, but
Robert would know because Robert is a brilliant researcher and a scientist full of information himself. So I would love to hear it.
All right, well, let me tell you the Shiva and sand dollar story. This was a conference at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in Petaluma, California, and it was called Mind and Matter, I think. And there were different speakers that were coming, but it was dealing towards scientists. I think there were a lot of scientists in the audience. There was about 70 or 80 people, and some of them were there to show you the magic, not the real magic, but the magic that comes that you can be deceived in psychic phenomena and how it's done. And I found that fascinating because I didn't know how, when they do things on stage, magicians, things that they do to fool people, and it's really not a psychic thing, it's really a trick. So
and I find that interesting too because I have no idea how they do it either.
Right. So I always think there's still a little something in there of psychic going on, but anyway, but they do it all, and we were actually got to see some of the tricks and how they're done. And one of the gentlemen was Daryl Bem, who's from Cornell University, and that's the sweetest man who was running some experiments while this conference was going on. And he said, I won't tell you the trick, but he said, I have something in this bag here, and I just want you to know that I asked someone here in the audience to go home and take, some items from their house, put it in a paper bag, give it to me now, and not tell me what's in it, and I'm going to show you how I can magically tell you what's in this bag. Well, before he started to do it, for whatever reason, I said, oh my God, there's a sand dollar in the bag. And I think I was sitting next to Jeffrey Mishlove, also an amazing person.
Absolutely.
And I said, there's a sand dollar in the bag. And Daryl's up there, and he's talking to the people, and he pulls out a sand dollar. And everybody around me that heard me say, I think there's a sand dollar in the bag, all went, And he pulls out the sand dollar, and I was excited. And he comes off the stage later, and he comes up to me, and he says, and those are the kind of words that stay with you forever. He said, what I was doing on the stage was magic. He said, but what you just did was real. And that was such a line that I've always been able to keep, that I just feel was such a great validation.
Absolutely.
And later in the same, then he asked me to be in his experiment, which was the one where they wanted to see whether your body could sense like sensual photos before they come, instead of sensing, violent or frightening photos, which is another experiment. They got very good responses on people being able to tell that a sensual photo would be coming up before the person actually saw the photo. So I participated in that experiment after, and he's just a very nice, very wonderful person doing good work. And also I was really grateful to learn how people can trick you. So then Russell Targ,
information.
Yeah, Russell Targ went up to do a demonstration, and Russell said, I've got something here in the bag, he said, and I want anyone to take a piece of paper and pencil, and he guided you through a remote viewing so that you would draw what would be in this bag, different than what Daryl was doing. Daryl was doing a magic trick. Russell was teaching remote viewing, and how simple it is, and that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to take a course to learn remote viewing. It's something that you can do. So he's up there, and he said, I want everyone to draw. And then he says, okay, now that now the time is up, put your pencils down. And he said, does anyone want to say anything? So I raised my hand in the back, because I always have to do these things. And I say, oh, you're not actually supposed to always say an object when you do remote viewing. You're just supposed to draw the features of what you're looking at, but not actually state what it is. But in this one, I happened to state that it was an 8-armed Shiva sitting on a lotus base made out of brass. And he was stunned at that moment, so it sort of stopped the whole rest of the remote viewing, because he said, I'm sorry, we can't go on now. I want you to know that Gail is a friend of mine, but she had no idea of this object because I purchased it this morning before coming to the conference. So she's never seen it in my home or let me show it to her or anything. She was not my shill. And he opens up the bag and he pulls out the 8-armed Shiva, sitting on a lotus base made out of brass.
Oh my gosh. Oh. Well, wait. We have to make a quick run for the break here.
Oh, good, because that was the end of that story.
Perfect timing. We will be right back. Y'all come back too.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, Cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watch a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step, after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page, is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics, from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of, a bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my back gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM-DB.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I apologize for having to step right in there, but Gail, I'm having the best time with you, and we've got some questions in chat. Are you game?
I'm game for a question.
All right. April says, you can teach anyone to remote view?
Okay, let me answer that. I believe that you can teach anyone to remote view. Why do I believe that? Because I have seen the most skeptical person. At one of the remote viewing conference, there was a gentleman who made like a little remote viewing box that you could take home, and it had like 50 cards in it, all in envelopes, so that you could have the picture hidden secretly, and then a little pad with questions so that people could answer the remote viewing questions. So I had a bunch of people over at my house, about 6 people, and one of them was a very skeptical man, and he said, I don't believe in any of this kind of stuff. I don't believe in remote viewing. I don't believe in psychic. None of this is that whatever. Well, of course, when we opened up the card and took it out after everyone did their drawing, he had the best, most accurate drawing of the picture that was in the envelope, and nobody did as good as he did. So here's a completely skeptical person who was totally against the idea you could even do such a thing, and he turned out to do the best drawing of anyone. So it shows you right there that even a skeptical person can do this on the fly with no training whatsoever. That would be my first answer to that. And then my second one would be part of remote viewing, at least for me, from my training. I've never been trained as a remote viewer, so I can't even answer what the training would be to be a remote viewer. I just was able to do remote viewing when I was asked to try this task. And at that time, it was at a place called Interval Research, and my husband worked there as a scientist and computer scientist, and Dean and Russell had an office there. And so I went in to meet them, and this is how our friendship and work together began. And I had to tell them all the psychic stories that had ever happened in my life. And after 10 pages of writing things that I could remember, because nobody had ever asked me that question, so I'd never made a list of, never even thought about it, because it's just how I live. So I didn't think about like a list of it, And so they had me organize stuff that I'd never thought about. And when we finished, they told me, you should write a book, and we'd like to do this remote viewing with you. So we sat down, and Russell would say to me, I want you to draw, that's 1:00 right now, I'd like you to draw a picture that the computer's going to select at 3:00. So neither he nor I nor the computer knew what the photo was going to be, and he's asking me to draw this, and I don't know that I can do these kind of things. But sure enough, I draw this picture, and then at 3:00, the computer random number generator picks 1 out of 300 National Geographic photos of places around the world, and I draw what's in the picture. So right there on an office floor, I learned that I could do something I didn't even know I could do.
Isn't that fun, though?
Very fun, because up until that point, I'd only been doing whatever naturally happened for me, dreams and things like this. But I want to go back to about the teaching of the remote viewing. There are 2 apps, if anyone wants to write this down or grab a pen, and one is called Esp Trainer, and it's a free app, and it works on your phone and your iPad. I think this also might work on Android, I'm not sure, but I know everything was made for Apple. And then this is an app where you see 4 square colors, and you're to pick which one you think the picture is behind. And you do this 24 times, and it tells you at the end of your 24 whether ESP is present or you're doing good, or depending how many you guessed in the 20 out of the 24. So this was one of the systems, but it used to be a machine that was used at SRI to train the military and the people that the CIA, what they were training them to do remote viewing. So Russell Targ asked my husband, and he brought the machine here, so we had the actual machine, and asked, could he make that to put into a telephone? and my husband made that for him. So if you want it, like, it's more of a, it feels more like a way for me. I find it teaches me which is the thought that comes in that's the answer to the remote viewing, or which is the thought that comes in that tells me behind red is the pyramid. Well, it's a fleeting thought. It's not something that is sitting there in your brain going, for me, that was way how it works anyway. It just floats by very fast. And that's the one I know is the answer when I just get a fleeting moment of saying, oh, pick red. If I think about it and sit there and say, is it behind the red, or is it the blue, or is it the, I don't get the correct answer. If I just let my mind be still and let what comes up, the spontaneous one is the one that gives me that answer. So then Russell decided this year, which is a few years later, and that app has been very successful and everyone really enjoys it. Kids like to play it also, so I recommend people trying it out. The next app was designed more like a remote viewing like we do, where there's pictures, but we have to describe them. So what he did here is it's 207 photos, and you have to answer 2 questions to each photo. You answer are there bridges? So the question would be bridges or no bridges, water, no water, mountains, no mountains. So there's certain properties in the pictures, and they choose certain properties that are good targets for remote viewing for this. And you start to be able to train yourself and see, oh, when was I correct? When I did the least amount of thought, or when I spent a lot of time thinking on it? You start to see how you operate to be able to find the answer for that. And I think it's a great teacher, and the photos are very beautiful, and you can play over and over again. And right now it's still free. So I would suggest
that one called?
This one's brand new. It's only been out for, 3 months maybe. And this is called Stargate Esp. And Stargate was the name of the program that Russell and Dean and all these men were involved in during the SRI project. But now it's declassified, and he's permitted to use that as the name for his app. So my husband just finished that for him. I was able to participate in some of it, which I've always enjoyed, that I can participate in some of these things and work with him a little bit on it. And we're hoping for it to be as successful as the Esp Trainer is.
Well, I think that's just absolutely fascinating, because I have studied Stargate. So for me, this is going to be like, whoop, whoop. So I'm going to have fun.
When I told it to Michelle, because she teaches remote viewing,
yes,
everyone has had a ball, because what we did is, when I told them about, I was in a remote viewing study group with her for Stephen Schwartz, and that's how I met her. And so when I announced that my husband was releasing this app, and it was private right then before it became public on the market, for them to give it a try, he got such positive feedback from all the remote viewers and the people that were training and learning about remote viewing. So I think that's the best answer I could give to April on her question.
Well, it's an excellent one, because if you have a tool, you would use it.
Exactly.
And these are tools.
And these are the tools they used during the SRI program. So they're made into the modern technology of today. They're not a big box built by somebody with lights that come on. I see a comment here by Robert, how do you say his name, Gurman, or? Mm-hmm. He said, I don't know what the comment is, but I just heard something about because there is no time. And I just wanted to comment on that, even though I'm not sure which he's relating to, but there is no time in these spatial, like when I do shamanic work, or I do remote viewing. I did a remote viewing for Stephen Schwartz where you were to describe what would the world look like. This was December 15th, and it was pushed to, we did this in 2019. And he said, what would it be like in December 15, 2060? And what is the world like? And what is money like? And what are cars like? And different things like this. And it was a Zoom or FaceTime or something where he was recording everything and I was just in my house giving him my remote viewing responses. I thought it was 5 minutes when we finished because information just kept coming up and coming up. It turned out we'd been together for over an hour. But in that place, it's like Robert just said, there is no time. And then I just did a shamanic one that I had never done this type of shamanic thing before. In fact, I did 3 of them in July that after we finished, I said, I really must be a medium. Because the things that were coming up, and I always expect nothing when I do these things, and whatever appears, I accept. So we're doing this shamanic cleansing, and I was doing it long distance with a very dear friend of mine who had some very heavy traumas of suicide in her family, and she was leaving her home, and I was helping her to do a distant with FaceTime cleansing, all in my shamanic clothing with my furs and my foxes and all the different tools that I use, my jaw harp, my drums, my rattles. And we did this thing with FaceTime where she would go in each room and I would do this shamanic stuff with sound and we would just cleanse the energy in the room. And first of all, I didn't know I could do that, by the way. Second of all, it was very successful. And when we finished, she said to me, "Oh my God, Gail, the new people are coming to move into the house in an hour. And you and I were together doing this for an hour and 15 minutes. She said, "It felt like 5 minutes." I said, "That's exactly what it feels like in remote viewing and in doing this kind of work, where you go to a place where there is no time, just like he wrote. And it's hard to describe it unless you experienced it, but you're in a place where time, as we know it, doesn't exist."
Well, and that's exactly it. I love that you say, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could do that. Because that's how things happen. Or that's been my experience also, is that, you're in an environment where something should happen, something needs to occur. And I'm a paranormal investigator, or was. I haven't been doing very much of that lately because of COVID. You can't go places, but about to kick back off. But I have found that if I'm doing energy work or things of that nature, then they do not. It blows people away because it's visible if you're in a dark environment. I did not know that. But B, you don't know exactly what is going on when there was this need from a spirit to communicate, and it doesn't drain me, and I'm not violated by it, so I don't mind doing it. And it's just kind of like flowing energy, just kind of building to flow. And it's just always, to me, interesting when something that I didn't know was going to happen blows me away.
I'll tell you two ones I did that I didn't, I'm not a skeptical person, but I'm also not I believe everything you tell me person.
Right.
And so, I'd heard about spoon bending for years, and
I'm glad you're talking about that topic.
And I always feel like, well, maybe it's possible, but I haven't done it. I haven't seen it. I can't say, oh, yes, spoon bending is a reality. You know what I mean? So I'm at I think it was an IRVA conference, the International Remote Viewing Association conference. And this gentleman, who I believe has passed away now, Jack Huck, and he was like the man of spoon bending. And so in the conference, they said, it's at 8 p.m. or whatever, after the conference, there's going to be a large group of people who would ever like to come. There was 300 people at the conference, I think, or 150 to 200. I don't know, it was a lot of people. And they said, anyone who wants to go down to the ballroom, the grand ballroom, there's going to be a spoon bending class. So I said, aha, this is my time to find out whether this is really a thing or Uri Geller just made it famous, or does this really exist, right? And you go in there. Have you been to a spoon bending event ever?
I inadvertently participated in a spoon bending event, but it wasn't really an event. It was a bunch of UFO experiencers.
Okay.
Who were, and I was there as media. I was just sitting chatting. Everybody was just having a general conversation, and a woman came through with a bunch of teaspoons. I'm sure the hotel wondered what in the world happened to their spoons, but came through with a bunch of teaspoons, and she was handing them out because apparently this is something that they have the ability to do. And it was funny because I said, what do you do? And they said, you just focus your energy. And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. So I did, and it worked. And I do have to tell you that out of all the things that I do, and my husband, my sweet husband, doesn't, get too wigged out most of the time. But the other day, he's like, can I just keep it up by the coffee pot and one of, the little bowl that I keep the sweeteners and whatever in? And he was like, I really wish you would move that. I was like, why? It's so much fun. It's a good memory. He was like, well, because it flips me out. I was like, wait. Out of all the things that you have seen happen around our house and all of the things that you have seen on my evidence reviews and stuff, this flips you out. This is the one? And he was like, I'm a machinist. I know metals. And I know that should not happen. I was like, not true. Energy is energy. Whether you're, putting heat to it or what, that's all I did. I applied heat, and it loosened up and bent. He was like, yeah, but it's a knot. I was like, remember that, bucko. So that's my experience with spoon bending, but it was dead easy.
Well, since this was
I found it so. What
a
did you
group
find?
who'd been doing, well, since this group had been doing spoon bending in hotels, they knew not to take the spoons from the hotel anymore.
We replaced them.
And especially when there was like 100 people there or whatever it was at least 100 people. They laid a couple of tablecloths down on the floor, and they spread out boxes of spoons and forks. And he said, everybody go over and pick the spoon or fork that calls to you, that you feel is the one that's for you. And I went over and I picked up a spoon, and you would all sit around, and the idea was focusing the attention, but also these 100 and some odd amounts of people all were screaming, bend, 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 while holding the silverware. And as it began, it was very interesting. It was, it was unusual. Well, it was a party. And so there was a little old woman behind me, and I think I can't remember if it was Paul Smith. There was someone who was speaking at IRVA that had been her student in high school. I just can't remember who it was. She happened to be sitting behind me, and she knew nothing about remote viewing, or she was only there to see what her student had grown up to be. And she was sitting there behind me, and the spoon just melted over. So she's just holding it in her hand. Little old lady, has nothing to do with any of this phenomena, but wanted to see what her student was doing. So came into this little class here of this spoon bending, and it just bent over. She didn't even touch it. She was just holding the handle. So I'm yelling to the guy, the Jack Hug, come and see what this woman is doing. So so that's when I realized, wait a minute, it really can happen.
Right.
So then I'm upset that, my spoon is not working for me. So I figure, I've got the wrong spoon here. There's hundreds of spoons on the floor. I got to find a new one. So I go back in the group there, and I'm looking, and I see a fork that calls to me, not a spoon. So I get the fork, and oh my God, as I'm holding it, and he tells you, rub the fork with your fingertips, exactly like what you're saying. It became very hot, but it wasn't just heat. It felt like the metal had turned into liquid molecules. And in that moment,
the whole molecular structure changed.
yes, in that moment, and it was like I could see little, even though I couldn't tell you what a molecule looks like, in that moment, I felt like I was looking at molecules. And I just take the fork and I twirl the handle. I wish I could show it to you, but of course we're on radio. And I just bend it around twice, curled up, and then I just touch each tongue and they just bend right down like melt. And then all of a sudden it stops. Everything's over. You can't do anything more to the fork. I can't bend it in any other direction. And I learned that it is true. One can bend spoons or forks. Some people have a talent for it. This woman I know, Fran, she can bend steel. She can take rods. You know, anything she touches, she can bend. So people have like affinities for some things more than other things. And some people are just natural benders.
And I found that interesting because I would have bet money that I couldn't do that.
Me too.
And boom, there it was. Well, I have to do just a quick little thing to say. You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I'm so appreciative of the fact that you are. And we're just going to move on with this show with more information. And Gail, I am so glad that you're here because I'm glad you brought that up, because ever since he said that and got pretty freaked out, I've kind of pondered on that, and I thought, well, no, because I know I actually did not touch the spoon until after it was already loose. And then I just kind of bent it, and the fact that it bent was just like wicked cool. So I thought that was a fun thing, but I thought it was a parlor trick, but it wasn't. I mean,
exactly.
It's just
another
neat.
one is, which I think was another IRVA conference, the things that you learn along the way, whether you go to a conference or a talk or whether you participate, I've always learned something more about how I function. So this was a very excellent teaching, and it was about matter holding energy. And I've had many experiences where if I've traveled to other, when I'm in the Great Pyramid, or, I have things that happen to me in powerful places, but I'd never thought about a specific object. But people always say, oh, the object holds energy and you can feel it and you can tell about the person or whatever. Well, until it was proved to me, I wasn't 100% sure that was a fact, right? And there was this woman, Bev Jager, who had a organization called the Psi Squad. And for over 30 years, her group did psychic psychic work for the police departments all over the country. But they always keep it a secret. It's never known publicly that the police department is contacting a psychic to find out where a missing person is or these kind of things. And she was I love this woman. She was really great. I was so glad to meet her before. A lot of these people have passed away now that did these amazing teaching. So she had, her experiment was, she came up to the group, and I think there was 150 people there, and she had minted pennies that she got from the bank. And she said, so no one's hands had touched these pennies. They were not in circulation yet. They were, fresh, shiny new ones. And she gave them, she said, there's someone here in the 150 people that are here who I asked them to take this group of pennies, and they had to keep it on their body 24/7 except the shower. That was the only time the pennies were not on the person's body, but for sleeping, work, eating, breakfast, everywhere, this person carried these pennies. And she's telling the story, and she's walking around the conference room, and she's giving each person a penny. And she said, now I want you to hold the penny in your hand, and I want you to describe what person, what do they like, what do they wear, what is this person like who held these pennies? And I'm holding the penny, and all of a sudden I say to myself, oh my God, this was Lance, a guy I had lunch with 2 days ago at the conference. And she said, once you feel like you know who the person is and you figured writing everything, we have the person in another room. You leave the room here of writing your information and go and see if that is in fact what you wrote about. Well, I didn't know these things about the man. I had just had lunch with him because he was in a group of people I was meeting. And it turned out all the things I had said, that this person, I think, was a lawyer, or I seen him in a suit. There were all these different things of information, but I actually saw who in the crowd of 150 was the person who had this penny.
That is just wild.
Well, that's when I realized energy is actually inside of an object. And yes, you can hold a rock and get information. You know what I mean?
I do. And I've only seen 2 people do that. I thought it was fascinating both times.
Well, I know we're getting closer to our end, so I want to see what else you want to ask me. But before you do, there's one thing I do want to say. What a joy it is to be on your show and talk to someone who I can speak to about these things that occur in my life on a regular basis and not feel like it's anything odd or unusual. It's just a way of life. And it's a normal thing to be telepathic or to be able to understand things that happen in your dreams, or, things that come true that you see in your dreams. These are all very real for me. And I'm talking with someone who's of this, we're both from the same planet. So I just want to say what a joy that is for me to speak with you.
Thank you so much, because I think you can tell I'm having a blast. So... But I had fun last night when we were chatting, about the show.
Yes.
So I'm just very honored that you're here, and thank you so much. That's a huge compliment, because I know that you've talked to a lot of people. So thank you.
So I think we have time for one last question, I think. I don't mean from your comments. I meant if you had one last question.
Well, actually, I do. And it is relevant to the dreams. But we have a listener who is a dreamer and has things happen from them. And, I used to do that a lot more when I was younger.
Me too.
As I've gotten older, I don't know if it's maybe I don't need the protection so much because I'm in a better place as a human, or if so I had a little bit of a rough go for a while there as an adolescent, but who doesn't on occasion? But it's like this listener, her name is April, and she said that she thinks that it's kind of neat, that she does have dreams come true, but it's kind of scary. But actually she says that sucks having bad dreams, though, because then you're worried about that. And I thought, well, I could see that. That would be kind of freaky. And when you do dream work, do you just do your dream work? Like, she interprets her dreams. Do you interpret just yours? Do you interpret other people's? How does that work for you?
Well, I don't.
Because that's a kind of personal thing.
I don't do dream interpretation, because what comes to me is I don't have to interpret it.
Right.
It's a piece of information. So I don't I'm not one that does symbolic things. I guess the most symbolic thing that I would be able to say is when I have a dream, if there's a telephone and I'm picking up a telephone in the dream, whatever information comes on that telephone, I know is accurate. It's my channel, or it's the place where I get the information from. It's in my dream, the symbol of the person speaking to me on the telephone is really telling me something I'm supposed to know. So that would be the only symbol thing that I've ever had in a dream. But I find my dreams, I'm seeing how, when we have frightening dreams, for me, sometimes I dream people's death. And at the same time in the dream, I'll experiencing what's happening to them when they're dying. So my Uncle Willie was, in New York, I was here, and I woke up from a dream and I start throwing up projectile vomiting across my room, and my husband's looking at me, "Are you sick? Are you sick?" And I say, "No, Uncle Willie just died." So we have no known fact that Uncle Willie just died, except 4 hours later, the telephone rings and it's my sister in New York saying, Uncle Willie just died. He was throwing up his guts and they rushed him to the hospital and he died. And there are those kind of things where I physically sometimes in the dream feel what's going on.
Yes.
I used to always dream people's, and my own, I have 3 children. They're all adults now. But every child I have, I dreamt them while I was pregnant with them, and I would always be diapering them, and it would show me whether it was a boy or a girl. I never, in those days anyways, nobody looked to see whether you had a boy or a girl anyway. But I would always know, and I would dream other people's, and I preferred the dreams of birth. They're a lot more positive than the dreams of death. But You can't choose this information. It comes to you, and that's the way it is. Yes. From all the work I've done, it doesn't frighten me or anything anymore. But, when I was younger, some of that could be extremely scary. I think for me, when a dream stays with me, like the rest of the day, it's like I can't leave that dream. To me, that's an important dream. I'm not sure if she made a mistake here. I never dreamed of my children dying. I dreamed of their births.
Yes.
And with the deaths, I don't know what to do sometimes. It's that kind of feeling of like it's a blessing and a curse. Are you going to tell somebody that you just had a dream that their husband's gonna die right now and he looks perfectly healthy and fine?
Nope.
No, you're not going to share that. You know what I mean?
No way in the world.
No. And I asked my father because I saw his death coming. And I said to him, "Dad, was I supposed to tell you when I saw it coming?" He said, "No, everyone's supposed to discover on their own death and when it's going to be and how it works for them." So I've always sort of kept that to myself. But there's also, there was years where I would tell my sisters, "Oh, you're going to have a girl. I had a dream." So I had one sister, and I'll end on this story. My sister Lori, I think this is such a fun story because I never knew I could do dreams on request. So I went to bed and I said, my sister Lori called me. She said, "How come you haven't had a dream yet? I'm only 3 weeks away from birth and you didn't have a dream." So I said, "Well, I didn't think you believed me half the time, so I didn't bother." I said, "So I'll ask for a dream." So I went to bed and I said, "Okay, I'm going to bed now. I'd really like to know what my sister's going to have. Is it a boy or a girl?" So in the dream, the telephone rings and I answer the telephone and it's my sister on the phone in the dream. And she says, "I had a girl, 8 pounds, 6 ounces." And she hangs up the phone. So the next morning I call her up and I say, "You're going to have a girl, 8 pounds, 6 ounces. She says, "Okay, okay." 3 weeks later, she gives birth and her husband's jaw drops when the doctor says, "It's a girl, 8 pounds, 6 ounces.
Now, see, that's fun.
I call that story Dream on Request.
Well,
and I think it brings us up to the 7 o'clock hour here.
I know, right? And I have enjoyed you. Thank you so much for your time. And we didn't even touch on half of the things.
Well, maybe we can visit again at another time.
I would like that. I had so much fun with you.
Well, hey, I'm launching a podcast September 1st called A Small, Medium, at Large Podcast with Gail Hayssen. Mm-hmm. So maybe I could have you on my podcast and I could interview you. That would really be great fun.
That would be fun. And I would love that. Thank you for that.
If you're on my show, I send you a banana bread and a jar of jam I made from my berries.
Oh. Yes. Yes, please. Banana bread is my weakness.
So
that would be wonderful. Just to spend more time talking with you and sharing ideas and histories and stuff. That would be wonderful.
Yes. I think we have a lot in common, like you said.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, I see someone says you need to have her back.
Without a doubt. That is my friend Lori Dorsey. She is my traveling paranormal research partner. We
Yeah.
we go to all the places.
We didn't even get to talk about shamanism.
We did not, and I was so interested in that. We have so much.
Well, we'll talk again, and I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. And yeah, I do want, this is my closing all the time, so feel free to kibitz with that if you want to. But, you know, I know that there's so much anxiety, there's so much concern. There are a lot of people who are scrambling for their lives tonight, and it's tomorrow there, so I hope that they have made it through to their today. If that, see, we don't need time. We just need to, yeah. But I know that it's terrifying. I know that there's so much right now, real, am I going to survive fear happening? Mm-hmm. And it's not just Afghanistan. It's not just, you know, from the Taliban. It's in our inner cities. It's in our rural communities. It's everywhere. So I think that what we need to do is to be being the change we want to see, because we can manifest that. We can manifest peace and calm. We can manifest change, and we can do it gently.
Yes.
And you know, we need to be gentle with each other. And so be the change you want to see. Smile. If you're wearing a mask, your eyes are the window to your soul. They will know that you are sending positivity. Do that. It's wonderful. It's good for you. So just be the change. In whatever method you have of communicating with whatever being you communicate with in times of crisis, please pray for those people who have no idea how they're going to get through tonight and tomorrow, and protect them. You can do that. We all can do that. I'm going to do it. I mean, it seems like a fun thing, right? Change
Very
the world.
good advice.
So thank you. And so we will see you next week, same cat time, same cat channel. And if you have comments or questions, shoot them to me. I'm on Fate Mag Radio on Facebook. And you can send them also. Email is paranormalexperienced@gmail.com. Or you can send them to me at fatemag.com. There are links there. So take care. Be blessed. See you next time. Thank you. Good night.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.